going on, everybody? It has been a long time since I've had the camera out. I think almost over 2 years. Still on the Dyna, still loving it. It's the longest I've had a motorcycle. I started on a little Honda Shadow and I rode that a season, and then I got the Sportster and I had that a season, and now I've had this since 2016, I think. Still really enjoying it. Changed the bars up a little bit, and happy with it. Happy with how she's turned out. So the last video I made 2 years ago was me giving everyone 3 reasons why they probably shouldn't buy a Sportster 72. And I took a lot of heat for that video. A lot of it was justified. Obviously that bike is built for a specific purpose. And when I bought the bike, it did fit my riding style quite good. What's up? And as I started to kind of adventure further from home on the motorcycle, it just didn't work for me anymore. And so here we are, a little over 2 years later. And I'm going to talk about the 3 things that I miss most about my Sportster. I'm going to do a nice cruise up the river here and talk about my old bike. Honestly, I miss that bike a lot. I've got a lot of pictures of it on my computer and that, and whenever I see one, I think, damn, I wish I kept it. In a way, part of me really wishes I kept it, but part of me, at the same time, I'm really happy I've got this Dyna, because it is a much better fit for me as a rider. In a perfect world, I'd have 2 bikes. I'd have something like this, and I'd have the Sporter or the Sportsty or the Sportsty. In a perfect world, I'd have this Dyna and a Sportster, or I would have a bagger and a Sportster. Not really do enough long distance riding to justify a bagger yet, but maybe at some point in the future. So let's talk about 3 things that I miss most about my Sportster. This is going to specifically, I'm going to be talking about my Sportster 72. It was a 2013 Sportster 72 with the hard candy custom red flake paint job, and all my previous videos except for my most recent one other than this are me riding that bike. If you want to see what it looked like, it was pretty much stock. I just did like mufflers and a tune, and then I did a couple different air intakes while I had it. I had an Arlen S on there, and then I went with a performance machine because the Arlen S was leaking oil. So the first thing I miss about my Sportster 72, this is an easy one. It's the style and the looks, and essentially the compliments that bike garnished. I'm talking like at a stoplight in town, people rolling down their windows and telling me that they love my bike. That's never happened on this bike, okay? Go to like bike meets in the area, and guys congregating around my Sportster 72 just because it draws the eye. It looks sharp. The paint job was really sharp, and just the fact that it's so trimmed down, is so the focal point of that bike is the motor. I mean, you see it, and you've got this beautiful motor surrounded with a really cool paint job, and it looked custom. You know what I mean? I didn't do a lot to it. But a lot of guys that maybe didn't know their bikes that well would think that it was a really customized bike. So I definitely miss that. I miss it being a conversation starter and meeting new people and having people come up to me and ask me questions about it. That never happens on this Dyna. Nobody bats an eye at this thing. It's just a black and chrome Harley, and although it's more comfortable to ride, and I think it looks pretty badass, it just doesn't draw the attention that Sportster 72 did. So that's definitely the first thing, and by far the most. I just really miss how it looked. I mean, you know, I'll walk away from this bike and I'll turn around and give it a second look because I like how it looks, but it's just not the same as the 72. I mean, I just stand there and look at it sometimes, that bike. It was a beautiful bike. The second thing is the power to weight ratio. The, like, I'm gonna shit myself when you crack the throttle feeling that I would get on that motorcycle. You know, it was super stripped down, like I said, small 2-gallon tank on it, bobbed rear fender, just the bare essentials on that bike. And I had that 1200 dialed in really good with my DynoJet Power Vision, especially the second season. I redid some tuning at the beginning of the second season that I had, and I only had it for like a couple weeks after I did that, but I had it dialed in really, really good. The stock seat on it is horrible, right? I changed that with a Lepera, but man, like when you crack that throttle in second gear and you're giving it, the bike just wanted to throw you right off the seat, just because it had so much power, you know, in relation to the weight that bike was. Really, really fun to throw it in corners and then accelerate hard out of them. It was just a real pleasure to ride that bike hard. And I think that's partially the Evolution motor thing, and partially just kind of the light flickability and low weight of that motorcycle made it to that 1200 Evolution. So I definitely miss that. I mean, this bike is probably comparable in speed or a little faster. I mean, we got a lot of displacement, but we also have more weight on this Dyna. So if you were to line them up and go, it would probably pretty close, but I feel like the Dyna would pull away. But it's just different. There's something different about it. There's just something unique and special about really ripping that Evolution motor on the Sportster. So I definitely miss that. And that's probably going to apply to a lot of different Sportsters, really. I mean, the 48 is pretty stripped down. They got those new 1200. They got I think they have an Iron 1200 now, and then they have a 48 Special, I believe. They both look very similar with subtle differences. So that's probably going to apply to those bikes as well. I'm sure they'd be really, really fun. The third thing that I miss about my Sportster, and this applies to all Sportsters, I hate this guy, like, varying his speed all over the place. Just drive, man. The third thing I hate, or I miss, the third thing I miss, we're talking positive today, is the customizable, you know, the customizing you can do on the Sportster platform. That bike is just so rich with available aftermarket parts, Harley parts. The platform's been around for so long, and so many people, you know, ride those bikes and make them their own, you know what I mean, with all the different parts there are. So I had a lot of plans that I wanted to do to that bike. I had you know, a bunch of different things I wanted to do if I ended up keeping it. You know, tank lift, possibly relocate the speedo, you know, bars. Obviously, you know, a lot of that stuff is you could do on any bike, but just the options available for the Sportster were much more than I seem to find on this Dyna. A lot of people buy the Sportster and they really customize it and make it their own, and that's possible just because of the huge aftermarket support and the parts on those bikes. So I definitely miss that about the Sportster. It was a really fun bike, and you know, I know that I basically rode around for 10 minutes or whatever in my last video, and I bitched about it, but essentially all I was really trying to get across was that you know, the design of that bike is really for a niche rider, and it's somebody who is bar hopping and, you know, wants a bike that looks really great off the showroom floor. And that was me when I bought it, but as I evolved, kind of as my riding changed. I decided that I just couldn't live with it anymore. Nearly running out of fuel, on my way to bike meet and stuff like that was just a little bit too scary for me, and not something that I wanted to keep doing. So I got a crazy deal when I sold it. I got way too good of a deal, actually. I ended up selling it back to the guy that I bought it from. It was like an independent dealership that used to be Harley, and then they just sell used bikes. When our dollar was good here in Canada, they would buy them at auction in the States and then import them. I think that's what my bike was. And when I called them, it had been a year and a bit, one riding season really, and I said, hey, are you interested in buying this back? I think he assumed like 99% of the other people that call with that inquiry that I hadn't put any miles on the bike. So he didn't even ask me how many miles I'd put on, and he threw me an offer, and I said, okay, I'll think about it or whatever, thanks. And then I think it was like 10 minutes later, he called me again, and he upped his offer by $500. And I said, okay, that sounds pretty good. Yeah, I'll think about it. And then literally 4 minutes after that, he called me again, and he upped his offer by like $1,000. He said, look, we're just going to do some work on the paper, say that you were unhappy with it, and then we can make it look different in our books or something like that. So essentially, I almost got what I paid for, and I think I put 7,000, 8,000 miles on it. So after he made me that final offer, then he asked, hey, what's the mileage, by the way? And I told him, and there was an awkward silence on the phone, but I don't think he wanted to go back on his word. So, he had made me the offer before really knowing what the mileage was, and he didn't go back on his word, and I got on her the next day, wrote her down to the dealership, and I picked up my check, and then I was on the hunt for another bike. And luckily this thing came up, so it was just kind of like the stars aligned and it worked out. But yeah, good bike. Really love the Sportster, and maybe one day if the stars align again, I'll pick another one up. Maybe not necessarily the 72, but that's kind of the direction I would go with one, even if I got just a standard bike, a standard Sportster. I think that's going to do it for today. It's kind of, like I said, it's been a couple of years since I've motovlogged, so that was probably about a 10 to 12 minute ride. If you're still watching, kudos. I kind of do this just because a lot of my buddies and stuff, we work shift. I'm actually on nights right now, so I'm kind of getting out for a little bit today before I go in. And, when I'm riding by myself, I like to fire up the camera, and kind of gives me an excuse to ride. So that'll be it. I think I'm going to talk a little bit more about my handlebars here in another video, and because this job was a bit interesting anyways, there was some stuff that Harley did on these bikes that made it difficult, so I'll probably discuss that in another video.